Goedenavond, iedereen. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this already 35th lecture in the Going Public lecture series of the Faculty of Architecture at the KU Leuven campus St. Lucas, Ghent and Brussels. And it's a special one tonight because as we are trying to create a community here at the faculty, we are having a joint venture lecture tonight of Theo De Meyer, in which we combine or we join forces with the interior architecture and the craftsmanship engagement. A bit of context for this Going Public lecture series is that maybe some of you as regular guests know that we have already organized the master environment at the Faculty of Architecture into a couple of engagements. We have mediating tactics, we have urban cultures, we have legacies, we have the Brussels way, and we have craftsmanship. And it is within this context, the craftsmanship engagement, as I said, in joint venture with interior architecture, that it is our pleasure to invite Theo De Meyer, who is one of our colleagues, for tonight's lecture. And in a moment, Karel Dekkers, the program director of interior architecture, will introduce Theo before the floor goes to Theo. Maybe some proceedings for tonight. The lecture will take about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we still have some time for questions and a conversation. And we will do that on the base of the Q&A button, which you should be able to find underneath at the bottom of your screen. On the bottom of your screen. Voila, that's it. We are also recording this lecture, and going back to the questions again, I will probably read some of the questions to Theo, since we have noticed that in the previous lectures it's always a bit difficult to invite panelists or audience into the platform and have an interesting debate, not that it's related to the content, but more to the form and the setting of this lecture series. So, Karel, please introduce Theo to us.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Thomas, for your introduction, and well, really looking forward to this evening, to the lecture of Theo De Meyer, who's recently joined us in an interior architecture program as a guest lecturer. He's trained as an architect. He lives and works in Ghent, and he moves between architecture, design, and the arts, often reconciling the various disciplines in his projects. He plays with context and scale, interprets and transforms, creating new worlds from the act of building, such as, and this is the title of this evening, by turning a roof into a table or a pillar into a table leg. He also collaborates with Doorzon architects, interior architects, and who are also teaching at interior architecture. He's been working with renowned architects here in Belgium and artists such as Ante Timmermans and then Robrecht en Daam and de Vilder and Vink en Talieu. He's also been working in Switzerland, teaching there at the ETH in Zurich, and being guest critic in several other universities. So really a big kind of chunk of experience and of international kind of profile of interior architecture. So really very warm welcome to Theo, and thank you for giving the opportunity of this lecture this evening. So I'm giving the floor to you now, Theo.
Thank you. Shall I share screen? Yeah. Okay. I drank a bit too much coffee today and I was enthusiastic to add some slides. So hopefully I don't go too fast, or maybe I leave some things out. I will see. A roof as a table as a roof. I'm an architect, but at the same time, I'm not so sure anymore what I am exactly. Is it interior architecture, designer, architecture, artist? Let's see. But I want to talk a bit what I'm doing throughout the history, and to explain you a little bit better. I'm going a little bit back to when I was young. You see me, I'm mother on the right. And as a kid, I was raised in a company which was harvesting tomatoes. It's a company of 30,000 square meters of greenhouses. It's a family business, and in the back you see already a small greenhouse which grew to a much bigger one. But in fact, it was nice to be there as a kid, because underneath you see this huge water reservoir, which is for collecting water off the roof. And we were swimming in there, we were building camps, and you are really raised in between independence, and by that you will become a kind of independent young kid yourself. And of course, my father, his ultimate dream was to take over the business, but I had not so much interest in tomatoes. I was much more interested in doing things, making things, and so on. So for example, here on the left, you see a shed which was built by my father and grandfather. Back then, when I was young, I didn't see the beauty out of it, but it was just hands-on period of my life. So I was interested to study construction, which was masonry and wood. And when you are 12 years old, you start with the first mailbox, and that mailbox becomes a small stair. And if you look to the pictures, these are really kids, very young. And soon they start to explain you how you put a beam in a wall, how do you make a floor, how a roof is coming down. So you end up in this warehouse completely filled and stacked up with a lot of details, constructions, and becomes a kind of laboratorium on how to make things. So first semester it was masonry, the other semester it was wood, where you start from a pen and hole situation, you go to a bench, and then you end up with the full house. So you need to imagine that my whole life as a kid was actually bricks and wood. So this is the banner when you finish school, and they always tell you that you are now ready for work, you are ready for life, and you see this kind of working caps throwing in the air, but at the same time university caps with the title giving form towards the future. But at least a lot of my friends, they were sons of contractors, but I was not. I was also not so much ready for work, and luckily I had a friend who had a father which was an architect, and I joined him towards St. Lucas back in the days. So I had a nice time, and I think in my third year, I met my professor, Jan de Weilder. Probably you know him. I started to work in the office on weekends and holidays. I had the pleasure to make models for exhibitions, doing competitions and so on. So soon after, I was starting within the office of Jan de Weilder, Ingevink and Jo Tailleux. My first assignment was a garage. You see already the green column. But soon enough, this garage became a second garage, and that second garage was actually a house. So it was a kind of new meaning on how to build. So things went well, and soon enough, since 2013, I became a kind of project architect within the office, but not for the big project, but more of all small kind of houses, exhibitions, and so on, which was interesting because there were so many projects and so less time, so you always need to act fast. And by that, you have to be really hands-on. So to me, the most interesting point is that the environment is contractors, colleagues, collaborators, at that time bosses, clients, so you need to deal with a lot of people around you. So it's really become a kind of collaboration of doing. 2019, I started to teach, being assistant, and towards that building, there was a kind of extra layer on giving meaning to what you are doing. But actually, I had the urge to do things myself, and probably everybody has. But in my case, it was building furniture, or to me, it was a kind of scale which was good to do. So my whole life or my whole environment was a kind of surrounding of construction sites. So what we found on construction site became our interests. For example, this is a panel which you see they use on muddy grounds for the trucks to drive over. It was not such a nice panel, but because of it was raining, there was very intense colors. So we started to make cutting boards of it. Soon after, you want to make things yourself. So you go to building shops, you are trying to find the right screws, but also you see kind of beautiful colored tapes. So those tapes are becoming a table leg. Our interest was tubes. So those tubes became a lamp. And after today, it became also a fountain. So a nice discovery was also there is that what you know to talk about with contractors, you also start to find out where to find certain things quite locally. Some building shops are into plastic, some are into wood, the other masonry. So you also start to think differently. It's more where to get things from, and then the result is coming by itself. So in that sense, we are designing less, but we are more assembling things. So tubes became the main interest, but as a title of the lecture today, a roof as a table as a roof. You could see on the left, this building has kind of certain columns, which could also refer towards the tube which is in front of it. So to us, they have both kind of similar complexities. There are different scales, of course, but a building should be stable as a table should be stable. A roof should be waterproof as a table should be waterproof as well, or well functioning while eating or working on top of it. So there's this interesting balance between scales for us. I fell in love with Stefanie. Stefanie is the one on the right, one of the founding partners of Doorzon Interieurarchitecten. On the left, you see Caroline. And I think when I met her, I was not sure who she was, but 1 week after, it came to me that she was Doorzon Interieurarchitecten. And of course, she's also working a lot with Jan, Inge, and Jo at that time. I was doing that small garage, and it felt like a great opportunity to join forces again. So it was a small house, and Doorzon was commissioned to do the kitchen and the bathroom that day. So it's a classical things for architects. So you start to design, you go to tendering, and then construction site starts. But then you think there's enough time to think about the kitchen. So the kitchen is always the last thing you do. But I was actually the one who was drawing the kitchen always against the wall. And it was Doorzon who told me that you could not do that because that's not so much interesting. You should turn the kitchen 180 degrees, but then you could look outside, you could look towards the living room and so on. So of course, probably everybody thinks, and I think also towards, if I see this image now, of course it needs to be turned 180 degrees. But within that office structure of 30 people, it was never debated that I have been drawing the kitchen against the wall, never. The kitchen is somehow maybe the architecture too, it looks formal, but at the same time, it's a high roof. There were 2 beams to stabilize the 2 walls. And then Doorzon added a beam underneath with an extractor, a lamp above the kitchen, and a lamp above the staircase. Not only they are highly functional, but at the same time, they look just beautiful as it is today. So for me, it's doing architecture, meeting Stefanie, understanding how interior architecture works, and also the proud of the architect. I can do everything myself. This picture to me is important because this is something that an architect comes from one side, the interior architect comes from the other side, and then all of a sudden there's a completely new language which actually works, and it's interesting. So luckily, Stefanie and I share a lot of same interests, and Doorzon has 16 years experience, and they have a lot of marbles, linoleum, and so on. But I was more interested into stacking things, and in our cabinet, there was a kind of first suggestion towards a sofa. And we took it as an opportunity to make that sofa because of an exhibition. So we started to draw. We started to make models to find the shapes. But to find the exact shapes, we started to investigate the right angle, because sitting is different than laying. It could be a bed, it could be chaise longue. And then it became a kind of first setting up of what it was. We started to materialize, but the chair on the right is one of Doorzon with recycled foam, rubber. So the evident choice was to do the same. But that company is an industrial company. They were not willing to do so because we didn't order high amounts. So we had to let it go. And then we started to be interested in acoustic insulation. So it's also a kind of recycled foams. The problem with that is that it becomes yellow and if it stays too long in the sun. So we were trying to find a way how to make it durable, and we came to a company who was willing or who was able to put a kind of coating on top. It was not really possible to make it translucent, but what we discussed with them is to use less coating, so less white, and then you see a kind of glimpse of what the structure is behind. Because actually all these kind of foams are just beautiful as they are. We made a test, and after it became the sofa what it is today. So you see a kind of blocks which looks like marble. The marble was never intended to be, but it was a kind of lucky coincidence. And the structure of the sofa is made underneath. You have hard foam, soft foam, and then on top there's a kind of in-between foam. So it's literally what a sofa is. It's also display of hard and soft and the angles. So both, also in the previous case, it's about a kind of certain beauty, but at the same time it works. Not only technically, but we kept the first prototype, and we are more than happy to understand that all our kids, we have one daughter, but she and her girlfriends, they use it in very special ways. Yeah, there was a kind of maybe side note about the beauty of things and interpretation. And sometimes people think that we like postmodernism, and in fact, it's actually true. But one should understand well that, for example, this column of satsas on the left, it's not so much about the beautiful shape as such, but you should understand that Satsas was sick and he was in his hospital bed. And probably by boredom, he was stacking his pills that he got every day. So he made a drawing out of it and becomes certain inspiration for him to become to a kind of new form. So that the totem became a pepper mill. So there was also an extra function towards it. So it's all about fascination. Another person who is important to me is Manor Grunderwald. Manor Grunderwald is an artist in Ghent. And if you understand to know his work, he is collecting, he is scanning, he is ripping apart, scanning again, and then it becomes the artwork. Manor is a collector, has a lot of fascinations. And for example, on the left, you see a booklet that he found in a second-hand shop with a sticker on the nose of a boy. And on the right, there is a folder, which we all know as architects, but that folder became the cover of a book. So for an art exhibition, he scanned this booklet. It became from white to dark. And then in front of it, the booklet became a bench. So by things that has totally nothing to do with art, one could say, by changing small things, it becomes something interesting or becomes something valuable. If you start to know Manor, he's very open, very generous, and he is organizing exhibitions within his atelier called Neighbors, and he invites friends, artists, to share work and to show. And he invited me for the 7th edition to think about a kind of scenography, because there was a shortage of sockles to put things on top. There was a lot of 2D works. And so the first idea was, if you see on this image, these are tiles which we found, and the tiles are turned 45 degrees because it was more easy to pick up for the contractor. In that case, we took the gallery and we understood that it was 100 square meters. We found a company who was willing to order, to deliver 20,000 kilo of tiles. We stacked them towards tables, sockles, benches. And after the exhibition, we demolished everything. We stacked it again, and then the company brought it to the Netherlands, and it becomes a pavement. So in this case, everybody won because we were having a free scenography, the company has free advertisement, and in the end, there was zero waste. So this is actually one of the first projects or spatial installations I made. And it became a kind of interior where the artworks were somehow the actors. More important, wait, I see a chat. Okay. More important, this is the gallery of Manor in Cologne. The gallery is based on the first floor, but underneath there is a small storage space, which is directly next to the street. So Manor had a solo exhibition there, or he was asked to do, and he asked me to join towards the previous opening. And what you see here, there is a show of Max Fintrop. Max Fintrop is a painter which is working on a big scale. But at the same time, you see something in the middle and the kind of room divider. But it's interesting to know that Max Fintrop never makes 3D work. It's always a painting. But for him, the space was so wide, so big, that he felt the necessity to do something. So by that, he makes this room divider. If you turn around, you see a door on the left. You see a white box, which is the office of the gallery owner. You see on the right, a hole in the ground, which is filled with a raster, and that's the storage space. So it's good to know when you enter the big space, the only thing you look at is actually this part, and the other parts are not really used. So in that sense, you only use 50% of the space you have. Manor was aware of the fact, and he asked me to put more walls. He asked me to make a table for small objects. And the idea was to reverse the gallery. So let's clean out the office space. Let's clean out the storage space. Let's add a wall and let's add a table. So by that sense, we used 100% of the gallery. Manor was making his artwork, and I came with some materials. But at the same time, the tubes were becoming kind of inspiration for the scenography. This is the office space. The storage space, which is cleaned out. And the artists became nervous, or also the gallery owner, because of the heater on the left. And there was a debate of 2 hours. Should we cover it, yes or no? Is it in conflict with the work? But while we were adding the column with the light, it needed to have lighting, you started to understand that the radiator, the artwork, the column, and the staircase were actually the same in hierarchy. So it becomes a kind of composition, and it changed the room completely. On top of that column, we put an extra lamp because you would be attracted to look down. We made a table for the small objects. We were hanging a huge wall, which is hanging on the rail system. And it's a white cube, but in this case, the one context he had was the rail system. So that became the hanging. You turn around. And then you see a kind of, or at least to us, it becomes something between an interior, an art space, but at the same time, there was a huge problem because nothing was sold. The collector was not sure anymore what to buy. Do I need to buy the artwork now, or do I need to buy the artwork together with the scenography? But on the other hand, there was a really good press because there was a kind of a total aspect of a spatial intervention, and it was not only about a painting anymore. It went a little bit further. So also for the gallery, the other exhibitions, they always use now the office space and the storage space downstairs. So the 50%, 100% worked quite well. And at the same time, this was a very important show to us because from that moment, we started to collaborate quite a lot. So imagine that in this kind of space, you can also live in such space. And another friend of mine, Sibren van Overberge, he's a photographer. And he got in contact with the Weer Gallery. The Weer Gallery exists already for a long time. It's a company who was making carpets. And the father was collecting a lot of artworks. The son took over the business while the father died. The gallery stopped at the meantime, and now this warehouse became a storage for all the artworks of the gallery back in the day. But at the same time, they are willing to promote young artists. And one of the artists is Sibren, and he got an empty space there as an atelier, somehow in exchange with some work. And the first thing Sibren did was put on both sides a white wall. And in the center, he added a sofa, a plant, a table, and some racks. So he started to be there. So it becomes a kind of first interior, which you would never think about as an interior. So Sibren asked, I live 45 minutes away from this place, so I would like to sleep there. I would like to cook there. And we started the collaboration to think about how we could do that. So we were running around in this environment of the Weer. It's really beautiful because what you see here, it's a storage full of art pieces and leftovers of scenographies. These are, for example, legs of Ponomarenko installation. There were a lot of racks we could use because of the old carpet factory, but there was a kind of rolling staircase, which was easy to use for Sibren when he wanted to put some works against the wall. But we introduced it also for our installation. There were a lot of chipboards of Jan de Kok. There were some sockles. And if you connect it to the work of Sibren, you see a kind of house. We started to think about a barn which is made with all kind of collected and found materials from the Weer Gallery. So we made a kind of scheme, and what you see here is a big space, and the furniture is somehow dividing spaces. And this house was put in the corner because Sibren is the only one who has a door. And when you enter in a small space, you walk underneath, and then you are in this big space. So this house is a kind of sequence of how to enter. We were calculating and drawing everything very carefully. And I think in 2 days, 3 people, we made this barn. And it was a pleasure to do. So you enter in the kitchen. You look up, you have a kind of first glimpse. You turn around and you see a house where you sleep on top because nobody has to be in your bedroom while you are working there. But at the same time, it's a roof, and by covering the roof on the inside of the structure, you also feel that there's no necessity at all. The father of Sibren went crazy. Why should you invest money in these kind of things? But at the same time, you could see it as an installation which Ponomarenko could have been made, and it's just racks cantilevering on top of each other, which gives a certain protection when you are there in this big space. And this is his bedroom. So I could ask myself, and probably you could also think, yeah, of course, it's an art space and there's no conventions and there's not raining. But we would also like to think to bring it towards interior architecture, where in this case, it's a project which we call Klein Kasteel. And it's a couple, both psychoanalysts, and they are both working and living together in their house. But the partner moved in, and then conflict starts because when there was a session, the other partner could not cook anymore because of the noise. So there was almost a conflict in relation that they were doubting, should we now sell our house? Do we need to move? But actually we love our house. So they asked to us, can you solve the acoustic problem for us by, for example, closing off the full ceilings here and there? It's an old house, so nearly impossible to do it well. So what we proposed is to put 2 cabinets, and behind the 2 cabinets, it's an insulated space. By reducing half of the amount of square meters of acoustic installation, this money we could put into these kind of cabinets. So this small hallway here became double-sized. And you see this kind of 45-degree angles, but that was just necessary because there are chimneys here and it was impossible to connect straight. And by doing that, you have more space here. And on the other side, you have place to hang cabinets or put furniture in between. So it became a kind of interesting scheme. It's an old house, nothing is straight, and it's something easy to ruin by covering everything. And luckily, it was very inspirational because there was an architect in the 80s who did a very well job. And you see this window already, which is covered with mirror, and the doors are all painted in a kind of glossy black. So there is already a kind of architect who was there, who did a few intervention, and by that it changed a few things. The other intervention was ours, was the two cabinets, which you see on the left and the right. If you are in between, you also see the other architect made the sink. He made the wooden side on the left. We added some mirrors, we added the doors, we added the bathroom. So the hallway also becomes important because nowadays you're almost not allowed to talk about it anymore, the hallway, but the hallway is very interesting. When you go in that room, it's something completely different again, it's white. And there you see how everything connects to the existing. So you could see there's a lot of triangles happening. And it's just because there was a party for the birthday of Fik, and the flags were there staying for 1 year. And at the second party, we decided, okay, if you are there on the right, the cabinets, which is floating because of the acoustics floor, we could make a kind of curtain. And then on the left, there was a necessity for the ceiling and the wall to put something in between. So it's something that could like be dripping down. But on the ground floor, there was also for the clients, there needs to be a kind of waiting room. So we just added 2 doors. The entrance door, which is a kind of reference to the upstairs. But of course, it doesn't need to go to the top. So we decided to also do the flags. And to us, both if it's straight or is it curved, both are formal decisions. You go through, and we are lucky because there are 2 chairs that the client found on Wikipedia, but they could have been ours. And the door on the back is the door towards the living area. And there, this door was made inspired by the cabinet, which is white, and the wood, which is it's a kind of hardwood. So it's a completely different atmosphere. So in this house, you have two visions. You have the public one, which is for the client, and behind that public one, there is a kind of more softer environment. And in fact, we did not do so much. We added 2 cabinets and we added 2 doors. So that's what you could say is making something interesting from a really pragmatic acoustical problem question, let's say. And yes, interior architecture, but I always miss architecture sometimes. And in this case, I was lucky to do a kind of architecture project. And this is a kind of bel étage house, which is overlooking a large garden. And inside that garden is a greenhouse of 30 meters long. And the client was not sure what to do with it, this greenhouse. So also here we introduced just furniture, the broken glass. We made golden glass. We made an outside bedroom, an outside shower. We made a bench. And there's always this problem of the bel étage that there's a huge distance towards the garden. So we made just a better staircase. And the staircase is at the same time the garden wall, because on the left you see all the windows, which is looking towards the garden of the client. And then the stair becomes now maybe something where a plant can grow on top. So making architecture through furniture is something that works for us. But maybe it can also be more simple. It's just to put a camper, to put a barbecue or a blanket on outside, and it becomes a kind of outside and interior space. So in fact, you could do many as you want, but you should think about the context and to answer on maybe the questions that you would like. So yes, things are changing fast, and everybody has probably had a kind of sand bank in the garden. And unfortunately, this company had to stop because 30,000 square meters is not nothing. And in the 90s, there was a problem of gas prices coming up, and then the prices of the vegetable which was going down. And there was a necessity of making a decision: or you grow or you keep on staying the same you do, or you shrink. But in this case, there were no possibilities in all the three directions. But the good thing is to know is that almost 3/4 of the greenhouses in Belgium is empty or demolished, because there is no new generation who will take over this kind of business, which is not really affordable anymore. Something is that a rich farmer now is a farmer who has a piece of greenhouse on building land, but this is an agriculture field and you can't do anything more than this, than demolish. You can't use it for anything else unless using it for different vegetables. So the greenhouse was demolished, and the greenhouse was demolished and shipped to another country and there rebuilt. But a part of that greenhouse was kept. And it was just because there was a concrete floor. And I think now almost, is it 1 year ago or 2 years ago, the COVID situation. We live in a small apartment in Ghent. We were not able to go out anymore because the police that was telling you that you should go. So we took it as an opportunity to camp there in this empty greenhouse. We cleaned out. We started to put some water sprinklers to enjoy with the kids. And there was a first act we did because it was quite big, and this was the curtain. All went quite fast, and there was the first sketch. We wanted to have a room divider, which is now the curtain. We wanted to have a place to sleep. We wanted to have a kitchen, a table, a fireplace. And the ultimate dream, of course, is the swimming pool. So within the structures, there was a lot of bricks that my father has been making. Every fill-in was with bricks. So for us, it was a kind of evident choice to work with bricks. So the tent became almost a house now. And by drawing more precisely, it becomes something what we started to build 1 month after the first sketch. So we have been carefully placing everything. A friend of ours, he did the first layer, and on top of it, we were just gluing the blocks. It was easy to do it ourselves. And what was great to feel is that all of a sudden, this kind of construction site became also our weekend house. So we started to live there almost. It was a full summer like this, working and living. But it was also confronting because we had a lot of friends. So maybe we also asked ourselves, what are you doing? And why are you there? Why should you invest money? But after a while, people were coming and we were enjoying there. People were coming to help until it became, I think, a few months after, it becomes already a kind of first new interior within a greenhouse. We did a lot of mistakes because we understood that it's very warm. Some corners are better to sit in because there is more wind. And we started to make furniture which we could adapt. So we made insulated cabinets, which we could move to the summer kitchen or the winter kitchen. We added the kitchen, which is a covered space. We started to grow vegetables. Yeah, we would like to have a long table, but with all the leftover materials, a friend of mine made a kind of brick stack, and then Doorzon made once a shape of a kitchen, which was like this. And then I have been putting some beams. So this table, this kind of collaboration of doing, and all of a sudden you decide not to make straight cuts anymore, but to just take your machine and to make the curves. And what's nice to feel is that these curves gives the action that the people who are there, they can decide to who they turn, and it seems to work. This is our bedroom. It's also becoming a storage for our wood. It's the only stove we had. And again, this roof above this tent, but in this case, it was to protect a little bit from the sun, and maybe sometimes it was raining inside. We made a bench which protects us from the heating because this is the only stove we have. We invite a lot of friends who make installations. For example, on the left, you see a work of Bram van der Beek, who made something around this column. And by that, he made a kind of new living space between the many spaces that are already there. We like to upscale flower pots. And greenery is very nice because what you see here is the pleasure of tomatoes again. And we are lucky that our grandmother is still living behind. And she's there every day to protect them or to give them water. But there's also something that they, in their mind, and especially what she was doing already for 80 years, she was spraying, she was removing all the greenery that was not wanted. But soon after a while, you start to talk about it, and it's okay to let go. So slowly but surely, we arrive to really nice talks about how to go on with greenery. And also, I will explain that later. For example, here we are interested in the neighboring gardens. So we like to make fountains because these fountains within that greenhouse, it's nice, the water which is coming down. We invite more artists, and this is an artist, Philippe Vervaat, who was collecting plant leaves, and then he made it in aluminium, and then he was welding it into what's a new plant. So you are not sure anymore what you are looking at. Is it kind of abstract, something abstract, or something real? And it becomes this total thing, which we are not sure anymore what it is because it got completely out of hand. But it's nice to feel is that it's a kind of small paradise where we work and where we live. It's nice to feel that all of a sudden we have an atelier. We teach there. And we like to invite people to talk about this place or to talk about furniture and so on. So thinking back to when I was 12 and thinking back until the age I'm now, actually I feel that I'm doing completely the same. This is a roof, and underneath there is a laboratorium of construction, which is maybe what could say we should build less, yes. But at the same time, we are interested in to build better or to give more by doing simple things. And to finalize this talk, this is an image which we have 9 pieces of furniture which we collect throughout our projects. So when we make furniture, barely we sit behind a table and draw something, but everything is made within a context. And when you take it out of the context, it becomes something else. And it's not clear anymore because sometimes you do something with Stéphanie, and Stéphanie is doing something with Caroline, but also with Manor, Arthur. There are so many collaborations going on. And it's good to point out that you do it together. And we didn't make, in that case, we didn't make a kind of collective, but we called it Stand Van Zaken. And Stand Van Zaken is more of a state of affairs, a certain moment in between a collaboration of certain people. So this table here, or this chair here, could be Stand Van Zaken of Theo De Meyer and Manor Grunderwald 2015. Voilà. And sometimes the debate of the do-it-yourself, sometimes it's for us difficult because the do-it-yourself has sometimes a strange connotation. But for us, it's more into doing things together. So we like to find the right people who had the right expertise to do something together. So in that sense, it took 45 people to create 9 pieces of furniture, and where we also stated the photographers, the people who write texts, the investors, and so on. So in that sense, Stand Van Zaken is not a collective, but Stand Van Zaken is something at the moment where you feel a certain collaboration needs to be. So we have a lot of freedom to choose what we want to do, whether it's architecture or interior architecture or arts, without having to say necessarily what we are. And by this, I will finalize the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo, for this beautiful lecture, and also the really intriguing naming of Stand Van Zaken. I think it is probably one of the crucial things that we are looking for, or hoping for, that would happen on more than one occasion, where this kind of coming together, it's not really a community, but it's kind of a coming together of expertise, coming together of qualities, coming together of materials, coming together of opportunities that can generate something beautiful. Let's see if there are some questions. If you have questions, can you please you can ask them in the Q&A, preferably not so much the chat, but the Q&A. It's a bit more easier to follow from us. There are some thank yous to you, Karel, in the chat. Oh, sorry, Theo, in the chat. You can have a look at. Anyone has a question for Theo?
Just thank yous.
Yeah, at the moment it's just thank yous, which is beautiful. Well, I don't know. Maybe I can sort of start when you coming back to this idea of Stand Van Zaken. I think it's no, I'm sure it was Brian Eno, the composer and producer, who talks about the concept of the scenius. And the scenius is a wordplay on the idea of the genius, where he combines the idea of the genius with the idea of a scene, a scene of people, a scene of artists. And he says that this idea of the scenius is actually where genius things happen because of a combination of opportunities. People sort of find themselves at that moment, at that place, in that circumstances. And that forms this kind of very beautiful, bizarre, but also very genius interventions. Is that something that could be the English translation of Stand Van Zaken?
Yeah, I was not aware. It's good that you talk about this of Brian Eno. It's the scene and the genius, because yeah, it's a debate. You're always working with geniuses around you, but maybe I think when Stand Van Zaken started, it was just by a simple conflict. Is that I had a friend from school, a very important friend, Arthur, and we were very enthusiastic, and we said, okay, let's go, we make furniture together. But then 1 week after, we did something together with Stephanie, and then I was somehow a bit doubtful. Yeah, should I name this now also Arthur and Stephanie, and should we make a collective? But it was just strange to do. It felt really uncomfortable. And I think also within my collaboration with Stephanie, I respect really a lot what Doorzon is doing. And to us, it's important that Doorzon stays Doorzon, that I stay Theo, and for example, Arthur stays Arthur. It's important to become something what you are, and not something else. So Stand Van Zaken actually was an idea of Manor, because we were on a fair and we needed to make a booth, and that booth we named Stand Van Zaken. So the Stand Van Zaken was actually, the Zaken could be seen as the furniture, but of course it was a good coming together, which becomes a collaboration of many things. But yeah, of course, this scene, of course, a scene you don't create, you can't choose to make a scene, it happens. But we see more and more, and also this year, what we did a lot, and what we also did is curating. For example, this image which you see here is an image of the fair, Belgian Art and Design Fair. And the last year we were visiting a lot of ateliers of different artists. And from the position, you could be, as a young architect, jealous of what somebody else is doing. But at the same time, you could also contact that artist and say, hey, it's actually nice what you are doing. Can I have a look? And this atelier talk is always the one who is leading to something else and something new. And also the geniuses, for example, if you talk about Sotsas again, there's a whole movement before, which is in the 70s, the radical movement, Alchemia and so on. So this was a group of, I think, more than 50 people from around of Firenze. And in Firenze, they were just going out a lot of time. So they were just making discotheques, and those discotheques became furniture. And then, of course, all the big names from the postmodern movement, Ettore Sottsass, Mendini, Andrea Branzi, they become the independents. But for sure, they were just a scene of young people who just made beautiful things and new things. And there was one object made by Studio Alchemia, which was a table. And the table was made by an architect. The feet was made by a designer. And on top, there was a painting of a graphical designer. But you don't understand at all what this table is, but it's a kind of cadavre esquisse.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Voila. And it's super because you're always doubting how to find new languages, or should I do something special? I have seen something there. But by doing a different expertise, sometimes it's very surprising what's coming up.
There is a question in the Q&A, Theo. It says, so while designing furniture for clients, what were the different age groups of people that you were, I presume, envisioning or having to work with or work for?
The age group, meaning which age group I should choose. In generally, for us, it's not. It could be for everybody. I mean, even our grandmother has a chair which you could sit on, and for example, this sofa, which you could see never in the house of my mother. My sister bought one now, and all of a sudden they have a dog, so it was not welcome anymore in that house. And the sofa became now a centerpiece in the house of my mother, very rural. And it's working fine. It's working fine. Maybe it's not the first expectation when you see it, but when you start to use it, or maybe it's there by an accident, it works.
Maybe the question also relates to ergonomics in the sense of the shape of the chair. Or furnitures. Any other questions? Yeah. Maybe Karel, you want to intervene?
Yes, I still have a question. Thank you, Theo, for your marvelous lecture. I really enjoyed it. There were so many aspects of interior architecture that you touch upon that were really very fascinating to me. The connection with do-it-yourself workshops and shops and things that you make yourself, and you put it in a kind of this very recognizable Flemish context. Really was very I find it very attractive and stimulating. Just one question regarding, because this is a theme that also returns quite a lot in our program of interior architecture, and especially as a trained architect, how do you see the relationship between interior design and interior architecture? I mean, is it something that you think like is a kind of an artificial kind of let's say way of dividing disciplines, or do you see more a kind of interdisciplinary kind of approach to this? How do you see that kind of question?
I never understood really what this balance was, or I didn't see that, because what I see is, for example, if I look to Doorzon, the people who are coming for a stage are interior architects, and if I look to, for example, Bram van der Beek, a furniture maker, a lot of people of interior design are going towards Bram van der Beek. So one maybe a realistic feeling could be is that one is more into object and one is more into the architecture of the interior. I don't know if I should be critical on this. I think I understand what could be the difference, but I never understood that difference. Maybe also, I think there are many debates now within interior architecture. Can you overlap towards architecture? Because sometimes it's confronting also for me. I'm an architect. And then you go to interior architecture and then they say, but yeah, why do you do that? You are an architect. But also architects tell me you are not a real architect because you don't do competitions. You are actually an interior architect. So everybody is telling you what you are. But in fact, I'm feeling very comfortable by not knowing what I am. And even artists, if you are inside the world of the galleries, I was once, when I was a student in a lecture, and there was a lecturer and he said, architecture is not art. He was so convinced of that I kept on saying for years and until now still that I'm not an artist. I'm not at all an artist. Sometimes there's a person that says actually maybe consider to be one or consider to name it yourself. But you don't do, because there is a kind of whole world of gallerists which take art very serious. And there is also, there's a huge balance of what you are, what you can be. So in that sense, I don't like to say what I am. I keep on saying I'm an architect. So I think for interior architects or interior designers, they can just call themselves, I'm an interior architect, or they just have to be proud on even if they are a designer. Be a designer.
Okay, thanks very much.
Is there other questions from the audience? Please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, the bottom right position of your screen. Theo, is there a project on your mind that you would really like to do but did not have the opportunity to do yet?
Yeah, sometimes I think I would like to end up doing a big project. But first, maybe soon, there is, I would like to do a festival or a discotheque. For example, if I will not name it by name, but sometimes you see inside festivals, there's kind of short period of time, so you need to think about something which can be demolished after, but it can be a form or it can be a shed. It's quite free to experiment, and those experiments, and maybe not a certain project, but those experiments I would like to bring to architecture, which I was explaining before, like the ideas which you bring to interior architecture or towards architecture, and maybe even to bring it to the bigger scales.
Yeah, this thematic of this temporality or temporality seems indeed present, and I think the figure of the roof below the other roof is sort of almost like the most dense or the most condensed form or appearance of that concept of a temporality in the work, which I find striking, and then sort of seeing that in a big scale, it's very, very relevant questions to address. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but also COVID centers. All of a sudden, a sports hall becomes a hospital.
Yeah, I think it would be sort of an interesting design question for you. How would you redesign a COVID center, testing center, or from not purely the mechanism of passing through it, but also of creating it as an environment in which there is I don't know what kind of characteristic should be there, but that would be indeed really an interesting design and research question.
But also bigger scale, if you think about, for example, this greenhouse, 30,000 square meters, they demolish it and they put new buildings on top of it, which is really a disaster. And there are so many topics that everybody was moving towards the city, and now everybody goes back to the rural area. but what to do with all these kind of greenhouses? But they can become valuable. In fact, if you look to Kunsthal here in Ghent, it's also amazing what they do. It's kind of different, but you could combine living with this working environment, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's this a really crucial part of, I think, emerging architectural debate and relevance is to how do you sort of unlock the spatial potential of spaces that have been used for other very pragmatically designed for very pragmatic functions, and then all of a sudden this space is sort of liberated, or it's not liberated, it's still packed in that structure, but through this intervention that you show, all of a sudden the space becomes liberated in a way. That's also, yeah.
And the next project, which is soon, which is the house for my mother. So she had, I had two brothers and sisters together. And now we are out of the house, so it becomes an Airbnb. So she wants to change a few things. But of course, in time, she added a carport and this and that. And it's a kind of really a rural house. And for an architect, totally unsexy. But I'm into the vibe to make really unsexy things, to find a kind of certain point what needs to be changed so it can become interesting. Also, with all this kind of fermetes, do you demolish and rebuild, or can you change within small meanings a big gesture? And therefore, it's actually interior architecture, but you arrive towards architecture or all the debates, what you are, there is no hierarchy anymore, even it's about a chair. And that's why this is to us interesting, a roof as a table as a roof, kind of balance.
Yeah, it allows you to make appear things which otherwise remain hidden. It's something that you can that you do very powerfully with your project. Maybe since we are almost at the end of our time, there are no questions in the chat. Theo, thank you very much for your lecture. There is a question here if it's possible to visit the greenhouse.
Yeah, but not in separate days. Maybe if you can discuss, I don't know if it's a student or who.
I think probably keep an eye on the social media of you and of Doorzon. If there are some events organized there, that would be the moment probably to visit it. Or if it's an organized visit, I can understand.
It's one should not know that it's a private space. Yeah. Sometimes we do an exhibition and then it's open. But of course, we are always happy to give a tour if it's possible. So, yes.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you very much, Theo. Thank you, Karel. I don't know if you want to close the session, Karel. If not, I wish you all a beautiful night, and looking forward to the next lectures. You can find the announcements of the next winter lections for the months of November and December on the pages, social media pages and web pages and blog pages of the Faculty of Architecture. There's an interesting lectures coming up the next week, so please, looking forward to see you in one of those lectures. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night and see you soon. Thank you.